All of Alberta's energy resources, oil, gas, bitumen, all of our agricultural products are exempt from tariffs. And that's what we've got to be working towards for every single product.
The federal government is talking about export tariffs on Alberta oil and gas, or export bans on Alberta oil and gas. They're the ones who say that nothing's off the table. Well, we're the ones who are saying, then if that's not off the table, then the 51st state.
Alberta just dropped a bombshell about becoming the 51st state of the USA after unveiling a massive new pipeline deal.
Let's become the 51st state. It's just humorous, but no.
Canada's wealthiest oil province, tired of Ottawa draining billions, killing projects, and bankrolling Quebec, has finally had enough and is now boldly speaking up for its own future.
This whole Canadian political narrative that Canadians don't want to be the 51st state is, that's just simply not true.
Alberta isn't just some random frozen province that people fly over on their way to Vancouver. No, we're talking about a full-blown economic beast here. Alberta's GDP, that's $336 billion. And here's the kicker. That's 14% of the entire Canadian economy, while making up only 11% of the population. In other words, Alberta is pulling way more than its weight. It's like being on a group project where you do all the work and your teammates still get the same grade as you.
Alberta is Canada's Texas. Rich in oil and gas, fiercely independent, and constantly at war with Ottawa over energy policy.
And this isn't some, well, they're doing okay scenario. Alberta is pumping out 4.2 million barrels of oil every single day. That's 1.5 billion barrels every year. To put that in perspective, that's more oil than most of the countries in OPEC are producing. They are literally outproducing nations whose entire identity revolves around oil exports. Alberta isn't just Canada's gas station. It's basically the energy powerhouse of North America.
A bitumen pipeline would be, we'd be talking about a million barrels a day.
But here's where it gets real spicy. Between 2007 and 2022, Alberta sent $244.6 billion more to Ottawa than it got back. Let that number marinate for a second. That's over 5 times what Ontario contributed. And Ontario has 3 times Alberta's population. So yeah, imagine paying more than 5 times the amount your bigger sibling does, and then being told you should be grateful for the privilege.
It's about to hold a referendum that could shatter North America as we know it. Alberta, Canada's oil powerhouse, is seriously considering independence.
And 2022, that year was just insult on top of injury. Every single man, woman, and child in Alberta basically wrote a $3,000 check to Ottawa. Not voluntarily, of course, just so Ottawa could fund programs in other provinces. You can't make this up. And while Alberta's bankrolling everyone else, Ottawa's still throwing roadblocks at every single pipeline project Alberta tries to push forward.
Ottawa does not want you to know about. This is not just separatist fantasy anymore. This is economic reality.
Now let's add a little extra salt to that wound. Quebec, the province that loves to remind everyone about its cultural uniqueness and its special status, took in $13.22 billion in equalization payments that year. And you know whose money that was? Yep, Alberta's. And how does Quebec repay the favor? By blocking Alberta's pipelines at every chance they get. It's like lending your neighbor money for groceries and then having them complain about the smell coming from your barbecue.
What about Quebec? Like, Quebec is literally anti-pipeline to the maximum. Like, they hate the idea of a pipeline going through. So there are some obstacles. And right now it's a lot of talk.
So Alberta looked at all this nonsense and decided, yeah, we're done asking nicely. Enter the pipeline that's got everyone in Ottawa squirming in their seats. This isn't some rinky-dink project. This is a cross-border monster designed to move between 800,000 and 1 million barrels of oil every day. That's nearly 25% of Alberta's entire daily output. Imagine moving a quarter of your lifeblood straight to markets that actually want it.
Alberta isn't just another Canadian province. It is an economic superpower hiding in plain sight. With a GDP of $336 billion, Alberta single-handedly generates nearly 14% of Canada's entire economic output, even though it's only 11% of its population.
And the size? We're talking 42 inches of solid steel diameter. That's not a pipeline, that's an oil superhighway stretching across the continent. You don't build something like that unless you're planning to dominate. Now here's the part that made even the critics shut up for a second. Alberta locked in up to $3 billion in Indigenous equity. And no, this isn't the usual photo op with a feather headdress and a handshake. This deal gives Indigenous partners actual voting power, profit sharing, and a real say in decision making.
Here's where it gets absolutely infuriating for Albertans. From 2007 to 2022, Alberta sent nearly $250 billion more to Ottawa than it received back in federal spending.
And they didn't tack this on at the end as a PR stunt. These agreements were signed before a single shovel hit the dirt. That means legal stability, community backing, and way less chance of the protests and lawsuits that have derailed so many other projects. The route? Straight from Alberta's oil sands to BC's northwest coast, either Prince Rupert or Kitimat, whichever port says yes first. And once it hits the coast, it's open season for Asia and Europe. No Ottawa permission slips, no begging for federal approval, just Alberta taking its resources directly to the world.
Alberta produces 4.2 million barrels of oil per day. That's 1.5 billion barrels annually. To put that in percent, that's more oil than most OPEC nations produce.
Of course, Alberta didn't just wake up one morning and decide to build this because they were bored. This move comes after years of Ottawa turning perfectly good energy projects into funeral processions. Remember Keystone XL? That cancellation alone burned $1.3 billion in direct investment. That's money that could have stayed in Alberta, creating jobs and building infrastructure. But instead, it evaporated because Ottawa wouldn't get its act together.
The final cost to Albertans for the Keystone XL pipeline will be about $1.3 billion as the provincial government and TC Energy announced the official termination of the project yesterday.
Northern Gateway, dead on arrival. And it's not just those, multiple other projects have been choked to death in the endless, soul-crushing spiral of public consultations that never actually go anywhere. Alberta's government has done the math and figured they're losing about $17 billion every single year from stalled pipeline capacity. That's $17 billion that could be going to schools, hospitals, and roads. But nope, it's just disappearing into thin air while Ottawa congratulates itself on another environmental victory.
Is one of the initiatives we've championed, in addition to a transmission corridor, a new port. This is an east-west energy alliance so that we can emerge as an energy superpower.
And the private sector isn't blind to what's going on. Companies are moving between $20 and $40 billion worth of capital into US markets because, frankly, Canada's legislative framework is about as inviting as a cactus hug. Why invest here when you can just go south of the border and actually get things done?
The group says this billboard is only the beginning. More are planned as they raise money to have their voices heard.
Meanwhile, Alberta's energy sector is still doing the heavy lifting, adding over $70 billion every single year to Canada's GDP. And here's the reality, Ottawa doesn't want to say out loud. If Alberta decided tomorrow to pack it in and stop playing nice, the federal government would instantly face a $20 billion annual shortfall. That's not a hypothetical threat, that's straight up math.
So I think there'll be a fair bit of attention paid to it. It may generate some more support from some Canadians, but certainly we're seeing much more on the other side of Canadians who treasure their country.
So when you look at the full picture, it's not hard to see why Alberta's fed up. They're producing more than most oil nations, pumping billions into Ottawa's pockets and getting blocked at every turn. Quebec gets billions in handouts while killing Alberta's projects. Ottawa loses billions in potential GDP while Alberta bleeds billions in lost opportunities. And yet, somehow, Ottawa still acts like Alberta should be thankful for being part of the family.
Even he is saying that they don't deserve this. Like, this is wild.
And that's exactly why this new pipeline deal is such a big deal. It's Alberta saying, we're done waiting for your permission. It's not just about moving oil, it's about proving they can bypass the bottleneck entirely. It's about showing they can partner directly with Indigenous communities, lock in billions in equity, secure international markets, and build infrastructure that actually functions. All without Ottawa's fingerprints anywhere on it.
This is not just an ideological argument. It's not just a minor disagreement. Oil is by far the most valuable export for Canada.
Because when you're the one keeping the entire national economy on life support, maybe you don't need to keep asking for approval from the people who seem dead set on pulling the plug. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for Alberta to start acting like the powerhouse it already is. So here's the reality check that Ottawa pretends not to hear. The numbers on Alberta's independent sentiment aren't some fringe tinfoil hat statistic anymore. The latest polls show 36% of Albertans support breaking away from Canada. That's not just above average, that's above the 30% so-called tipping point that political scientists say can actually flip a society into a new reality. It's the point where something stops being a rant at the bar and starts being a movement people plan around.
Government, and that's the criticism that even Canadian people can deliver about our own government. Our government very much is nasty.
Now here's the part that's probably keeping a few people in Ottawa up at night. Among the voters who back the provincial governing party, that support shoots up to 65%. That's not a splinter group, that's the base. That's mainstream, that's 2/3 of the people who already have political influence in the province, basically saying, we're good without you. If you break that down further, it gets even more interesting. 19% of Albertans are completely all in on leaving. No hesitation, no maybe later, just straight up ready to cut the cord. Then you've got another 17% leaning toward leaving, which brings you back to that 36% total. And these numbers aren't static, they're growing steadily. Every time Ottawa blocks a project or lectures Alberta on environmental virtue while cashing Alberta's checks, the maybe crowd slides closer to the absolutely crowd. And while those poll numbers are climbing, Alberta isn't just sitting around waiting for someone to take them seriously. They're busy building actual, tangible links to the United States.
Alberta and Saskatchewan are already more connected to the US than to the rest of Canada.
And honestly, they've already got a head start. Alberta trades more with the US than it does with all the other Canadian provinces combined. So the economic relationship is already tilted south. Ottawa can hold as many press conferences as it wants. The trade data is writing its own story.
75% of Canada's oil production are absolutely united in standing up for their own citizens as over and against the dismissive entitlement mentality of Ottawa.
That new pipeline we talked about earlier, it's not just a steel tube for oil. It's engineered to sidestep federal tariff rules completely. The goal is simple: get oil, gas, bitumen, and even agricultural products flowing into US markets without Ottawa clipping a piece off the top. That's the kind of design feature that turns a piece of infrastructure into a political statement. And Alberta's not just making friends in Washington. They've expanded partnerships with Montana and even Ontario on things like resource sharing, public safety coordination, and anti-smuggling operations. Yes, Ontario, the province everyone assumes is glued to Ottawa's side, is on board for some of these arrangements. That says a lot about how Alberta's networking game has changed. And trust me, this fight is just heating up. So stick around, hit that subscribe button, and don't miss what Alberta does next.